Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Nicole Cousold-Matteo. I'm one of the members of the Executive Committee for Cleveland Carinthia. Behind me, unseen, there are over 20 other volunteer organizers who have made events like tonight possible. We are in the midst of an 8-day arts and culture festival, and there is no better exemplary event, I think, to celebrate our Slovenian cultural heritage than tonight, Prešeren night. This is the actual day of Prešeren's Day, and it's celebrated nationally in Slovenia as a holiday. Everybody had the day off, museums were open, and so forth. And I'm so glad that you're here to join us in Cleveland for this event. I want to give a brief thanks to the numerous volunteers, sponsors, grantees who have made this year's festival possible. And without further ado, let's start.
Okay. Dober večer vsem prisotnim. Hvala, da se zopet vidimo ob slovenskem kulturnem dnevu. Dober večer. Hvala. Dober večer še enkrat. Dober večer. Odlično. Tokrat smo se za spremembo zbrali v prelepi dvorani Slovenskega narodnega doma, ki letos praznuje kar 100 let obstoja. Dostikrat slišimo, da so v tej dvorani nove le te stranske luči in disko krogla, vse ostalo pa ostaja enako, kot je bilo za vaše prednike, ki so prišli v Cleveland. V njem se je skozi delala in se dela slovenska kultura. Veselimo se tega bisera in ga ohranimo še vrsto let.
Welcome everyone. It's wonderful to have you here once again for the Slovenian cultural holiday and the Prešeren Day celebration. This time we have chosen the beautiful auditorium of the Slovenian National Home, which celebrates its 100th anniversary this year. We often hear that there's, other than the disco ball and some shiny new lights, there's not much different in the hall, but that's our tradition. And it's something that we grew up with and that we want to maintain for the future. It was set up by our ancestors here 100 years ago, and we still enjoy it today. There's always been Slovenian culture going on in these premises. We are really fortunate to have this jewel in our community, and we hope to keep it for many years to come.
Na začetku bomo, kot se spodobi, slišali himni Republike Slovenije in Združenih držav Amerike na videoprojekciji zbora Megaron iz Slovenije, ki je predlani gostoval pri nas. Prosimo vas, da ostanete.
To begin with, we will present to you the hymns of the Republic of Slovenia and the United States of America in a video projection with the Megaron Chorus from Slovenia, which the year before last toured the United States. Please stand.
Danes bova vaša voditelja jaz, Luka Zibelnik, učitelj slovenskega jezika na Clevelandski državni univerzi in vodja programa spletne slovenščine www.onlineslovenian.com, ter Jože Velenčič, dolgoletni kulturni delavec, predsednik mnogih slovenskih ustanov, med drugim Slovenske zveze v Ameriki. Joe je tudi vodja slovenskega radijskega programa in ravno danes na Kulturni dan je bil na RTV Slovenija dokumentarec o njem.
Hvala. Today, your co-hosts are Dr. Luka Zibelnik, professor of the Slovenian language at Cleveland State University and the director of the online Slovenian language program, www.onlineslovenian.com. And I'm Joe Valencic. I'm a longtime fixture here in the Slovenian scene in Cleveland. I'm the president of the Slovenian Union of America, the Cleveland Federation of SMPJ Lodges, and director of the National Cleveland Style Polka Hall of Fame, our Slovenian Music Museum, and host of the Slovenian portion of Polka Hall of Fame Radio every Saturday with music and news from Slovenia, with my colleagues Denny Bukar and Joey Tomsik. As it turns out, today for Cultural Day in Slovenia, TV Slovenia broadcast a recently produced documentary about me, Joe Valencic, Slovenian between two homelands. Joe Valencic, Slovenec med dvema domovinama. Unfortunately, I missed it, but thank you.
You can go into the archives and see I already watched it, it's great.
Luka's in it too.
Ja. Slovenija je ena redkih držav, v kateri je kulturni dan dela prost dan. Takrat je čas za poezijo, prozo, proslave, vstop v muzeje in galerije je zastonj, vse povsod se dogajajo recitacije in spominja se naših največjih. Ulice, trgi, ceste, šole v Sloveniji namreč ne nosijo le številk in črk, ampak večinoma imena slovenskih umetnic in umetnikov. Marsikateri trg v svojem jedru kaže kip pesnika ali pesnice, okoli katerega se zbira mlado in staro. Kulturni dan je nekaj posebnega, to nam ubijajo v glavo že v osnovni šoli. A zakaj? Zgodovina slovenskih dežel nam pove odgovor, da se ne bi izgubili, da bi kot jezik dokazali, da smo enakovredni drugim, večjim. Ali, parafraziram Prešerna, da bi v Sloveniji zavladale enotnost, edinost, sreča, sprava.
Slovenia is one of the rare nations where culture has its own vacation day. Everybody takes off to enjoy poetry, prose, celebrations, free admissions to museums and galleries, and there are recitations going on everywhere, and memories of our most important literary and artistic figures. There are streets and squares and roads and schools in Slovenia that are named after these creative individuals, and instead of numbers or just letters, but most of them are Slovenian arts and letters figures. Town squares across Slovenia will have a statue to a poet or to a poetess, and then on Culture Day, the youth of the town will gather around there in song, in celebration, and in recitations. The Cultural Day of Slovenia is something special, and it's something that is instilled in young Slovenians at an early age. But why? Well, the history of the Slovenian nations, the Slovenian territories, gives you the answer. We don't want to lose our identity, and the language is so much a part of it to show that we are something different, something equally worthy, and also sometimes even surpassing the norm. To paraphrase Prešeren, let in Slovenia rule unity, happiness, and reconciliation.
Letos poleti se poslavljamo od osebe, ki je meni, nama, vsem zelo blizu in bo brez nje Cleveland veliko manjši. Rad bi napovedal nagovor naše generalne konzulke Alenke Jerak, ki je v svojih dobrih 4 letih in pol pustila ogromen pečat v severovzhodnem Ohaju in veliko širše. Slovenija je zaradi tebe bliže Clevelandu in Združenim državam Amerike. Ker me na proslavi junija ne bo, ker bom na počitnicah in se bom veselo potapljal, ti že zdaj povem, Alenka, strašno te bomo pogrešali. Prosim za en velik aplavz za našo generalno konzulko Alenko Jerak.
This summer, we bid farewell to a figure in our community who, I don't know how to say it, Cleveland would be somewhat of a lesser place without her presence. I'd like to introduce our Consul General of the Republic of Slovenia, Alenka Jerak, and in her 4.5 years among us, she left an impressive legacy, not just in Northeast Ohio, but across the country. Because of you, Alenka, you have brought Slovenia closer to Cleveland and to the United States. As for myself, Alenka, I'm going to miss you a lot. So please, let's have a round of applause for Alenka Jerak.
Hvala lepa vsem skupaj. Hvala tudi Joe in Lukatu. Dober večer, dragi rojaki, dragi ameriški prijatelji. Ob takih dnevih, kot je danes, sem vedno v dilemi govoriti slovensko, kar je nekako moja načelnost. Vsaj ob dnevu kulture je pač treba slišati slovensko besedo. Ampak dilema obstaja v tem, ker veliko od vas ne razume slovenščine in si mislim, kaj če mi jaz tlele nekaj govoriti, kaj me ljudje sploh ne razumejo. Torej sem sprejela pragmatično rešitev, da bo moj nagovor danes večer v angleščini. Slovensko besedo boste pa slišali še tekom recitacij. Dear Slovenians, dear American friends, I just explained, first of all, good evening to you as well in English. I just explained that I'm always in dilemma, at least for the cultural day, Slovenian cultural day. I said, I'm going to speak in Slovenian, that people will hear how it sounds and everything about the Slovenian language. And then I said, oh my God, but maybe half of the people, especially middle and younger generations, they could not follow, they cannot get the message that we have. So as pragmatic as I am, I decided to speak English for you today, that everybody could understand what I'm supposed to say, to get a message to you. And, but you will hear Slovenian language to hear how it sounds in the further program. We will have a lot of artists that they will speak also Slovenian. So today, February 8th, we celebrate the Day of Slovenian Culture, or as we call it, Prešeren's Day, which is a state holiday of national importance for a simple reason, because we as a nation have largely survived and stayed alive due to the culture and preservation of the Slovenian language, songs, dances, and customs. And with them and through them, we managed to preserve and strengthen our national identity. It is true that we have been an independent country for only 33 years, but the existence of the Slovenian nation and Slovenia goes back to prehistoric times. In the 7th century, we own a principality of Carantania, and the first printed book in Slovenian language was published way back in 1550. Today, Slovenian language is spoken by 2.5 million people, but it is equal in importance to other world languages. This is a great value and achievement for Slovenians, but it is not self-sustaining, and therefore, it's necessary to preserve and nurture it, both at home and abroad, especially with younger generations living abroad. And why do we celebrate this holiday as Prešeren's Day? Precisely on the day on the poet's death, on February 8, 1849. Perhaps because Prešeren was persecuted during his lifetime as a free-thinking intellectual and misunderstood and underestimated as a poet. And yet, despite everything, he believed in a better future, in freedom, friendship, and good neighborly relations. This is also why Slovenia adopted his inspiring verses of Zdravljica as the national anthem, and Prešeren became synonymous with Slovenian culture. Let me also say a few words about the meaning of culture itself. It is a characteristic of a human society created from and for the people. Let it be music, dance, fine or visual arts, literature or customs. Culture can also be considered as the way of thinking, behaving, and living, or as an art of dialogue, understanding differences, respect, solidarity, openness, and willingness to cooperate. I'm convinced that with a stronger awareness of the need to respect all aspects of the culture, including integration and unity, we, as a nation, but also as a country, could be much more successful in addressing future common problems and finding common paths, both at home and abroad. What Prešeren has taught us already 180 years ago in his toast. Tonight, we are celebrating together with different generations of the Slovenian community and with our American friends. We will listen recitals, poems, and music by renewed Cleveland artists of Slovenian origin and special guests from Ljubljana, Mrs. Mojca Mavec. Tonight, we also have a unique opportunity to see for the first time a private collection of Gregor Perušek, a Slovenian painter who lived and worked in Cleveland. We thank Slovenian National Home for opening the doors of Dimler Mason, the first headquarters of the Slovenian National Home, and giving us insight into the rich history of the Slovenian community here in broader Cleveland area. Thank you goes to Bob and Jerry Hopkins, who for many decades took care of this home. And they are the one who I think deserve the applause that we have still such a beautiful home and that we have so many events here. Would you please stand up? Bob, Jerry, where are you? Thank you. Hi, Jerry. It was you too. She just walked in. Thank you for everything what you're doing, Jerry. At this point, thank you goes also to everyone who helped to make tonight's events happen. The performers, both moderators, Luca and Joe, to Greg Nolson for his professional guidance at the Perušek tour, and to, of course, co-organizer of the event, the Kurentovanje team. And of course, I must not forget hard work of my team, Lucia, who prepared all desserts for tonight, and you will see how tasty they are. And then you're supposed to be on the diet, right? And of course, Nea and Anna. Thank you guys so much for your help and for your all support, not only today, during the whole years that we are together. And we also thank you, the visitors, especially those from far away, for sharing the Slovenian cultural story with us here in Cleveland. Let us also congratulate to all these years winners of the Prešeren's Awards and the Prešeren's Fund, the highest national awards for artistic achievements and cultural creation in Slovenia. And finally, allow me to, of course, on behalf of our Consul General, to invite you to join us and toast to the Slovenian Cultural Day with a glass of Slovenian wine. But before that, please do enjoy the program. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Mineva 100 let od rojstva slovenskega pesnika in prevajalca Ivana Minatija. Njegove pesmi večinoma govorijo o odtujenem človeku, ki se vrača v naravo, večina pesmi pa je intimističnih, čustvenih. Velja tudi za začetnika literarne smeri slovenskega intimizma. Profesor Milček Komelj iz Slovenske akademije znanosti in umetnosti o njem pravi, da je bil eden najčistejših slovenskih lirikov, pesnik občutek srca in tišine in da je v njegovi poeziji vse skrajno nežno, tenkočutno in pristno. Rojeva se iz pritajene bolečine, trpnosti, nemoči. V njem živi vedno, večno, neutešeno hrepenenje po ljubezni, po sočloveku in bližini večnih bitij iz narave, pa četudi samo neopaznih rastlin, otožnih cvetov, ciklame in še posebno nežnih in krhkih trav. Iz takega občutja se je porodila Minatijeva najpopularnejša pesem Nekoga moraš imeti rad, s katero so se identificirale množice samotnih, ki jih napolnjuje življenjska neizpolnjenost večnega hrepenjenja. Sam niti približno ne bi mogel napisati lepše, pesem bom pa vseeno prebral. Nekoga moraš imeti rad, pa čeprav trate, reko, drevo ali kamen. Nekomu moraš nasloniti roko na ramo, da se lačna nasiti bližine. Nekomu moraš. To je kot kruh, kot požirek vode. Moraš dati svoje bele oblake, svoje drzne ptice sanj, svoje plašne ptice nemoči. Nekje vendar mora biti zanje gnezdo miru in nežnosti. Nekoga moraš imeti rad, pa čeprav trave, reko, drevo ali kamen. Ker drevesa in trave vedo za samoto, kaj ti koraki vselej odidejo dalje, pa čeprav se za hip ustavijo. Ker reka ve za žalost, če se le nagne nad svojo globino. Ker kamen pozna bolečino, koliko težkih nog je že šlo čez njegovo nemo srce. Nekoga moraš imeti rad. Nekoga moraš imeti rad. Z nekom moraš v korak, v isto sled. Od trave, reka, kamen, drevo, molčeči spremljevalci samotnežev in čudakov. Dobra, velika bitja, ki spregovori samo, kadar umolknejo ljudje.
A century has passed since the birth of the Slovenian poet and translator Ivan Minati. His poems oftentimes treat alienated people who find solace within nature. Most of his poems are intimate and filled with feeling. He's also one of the creators of a new Slovenian literary style called Slovenian intimate poetry. Professor Milček Komelj from the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts says of him that he is one of the purest of the Slovenian lyric poets, with heartfelt sentiments and silence in his works. There's gentleness, sensitivity, and a certain clarity. It comes from unexpressed hurt, suffering, powerlessness, but his works come alive with longing for love, for humanity, and for the greater forces of nature, whether it's just an unassuming plant, the sweet blossoms of a spring cyclamen, or the gentle sway of grasses in a breeze. It's from these feelings that Minati's most popular poem is born. You must love someone. Many lonely folks in Slovenia identify with this poem as they seek fulfillment for never-ending longing. It's so hard to describe, so let's just listen. You must love someone, even if only grass, a river, a tree, or a stone. On someone's shoulder you must lay your hand, so that it gluts his hunger with nearness. There must be someone. It's like bread, like a drink of water, to whom you must give your white clouds, your brave birds of dreams, your timid birds of despair. Somewhere for them there must be a nest of peace and tenderness. You must love someone, even if only grass, a river, a tree, or a stone, for trees and grass know of loneliness, for footsteps always pass by, Even for a moment, they linger. For the river knows of sorrow. It needs only brood over its depths. For the stone knows of pain. How many heavy feet have already stumped over its mute heart? You must love someone. You must love someone. Walk side by side with someone on the same path. Oh, grass, river, stone, tree, silent companions of the strange and lonely, good, great beings who begin to speak only when men have fallen silent.
Sonetje nesreče. O, vrba, srečna, draga vas domača, kjer hiša mojega stoji očeta, da ukaže je me iz tvojega sveta speljala ne bila golfiva kača. Ne vedel bi, kako se v strup prebrača vse, kar srce si sladkega obeta. Zvesto srce in delovno ročico, za doto, ki je nima milijonarka, bi bil dobil z izvoljeno devico. Mi mirno plavala bi moja barka, pred ognjem dom, pred točo mi pšenico bi bližnji sosed varoval. Svet Marka.
Ko brez miru okrog divjam, prijatelji vprašajo me, kam? Vprašajte raje oblak neba, vprašajte raje val morja, kadar mogočni gospodar drvi sem trtje vihar. Oblak ne ve in val ne kam. Kam nese me obup, ne znam. Samo to znam, samo to vem, da pred obličje nje ne smem in da ni mesta vrh zemlje, kjer bi pozabil to gorje.
Dohtar, ti jezični dohtar, kaj postopaš ti za mano? Ne prepiram se z nobenim, da bi peljal mojo pravdo. Ni umrla teta moja, dekle staro, da bi dohtar mi opravljal po njih dedino bogato. Sem premlada, da bi pismo ženitvansko se pisalo. Dohtar, ti jezični dohtar, kaj postopaš ti za mano? Ne zameri cvet lepote, dekle drago. Naj tako ti mirni dnevi, Bog ti živi, teto staro. Je v 16, mislim, leti se možiti še prekmalo, da te ljubit ni prezgodaj, tvoji mi pogledi pravijo. V pravdah ne želi peroti, ali srce le zate užgano ti želi v ljubezni služit. Brez pokoja to za tabo vodi mi poglede, misli in noge z močjo neznano, koder hodiš. Cvet lepote, žlahtna roža, dekle drago.
Da ne smem si ukazala belih rok se dotaknit. Zvedla deklica si zala, kako znam pokorn bit. Da ne smem si ukazala od ljubezni govorit. Zvedla deklica si zala, kako znam pokorn bit. Moram, da si ukazala hojo k tebi opustit. Zvedla deklica si zala, kako znam pokorn bit. Moram, da si ukazala tebe se povsod ognit. Zvedla deklica si zala, kako znam pokorn bit. Zraven si mi ukazala, da te moram pozabit. Bogov, deklica bi zala, ak bi moglo se zgodit. A srce mi drugo ustvari, ali počakaj, da to bit v prsih neha. Bog te uvari, pred ni moč te pozabit.
Danes nas čaka lep večer in povedala bova kar vse po vrsti, da ne bova predolgo samo midva na odru. Z veseljem vam predstavljava doktorico Suzanne Andrews, veliko prijateljico slovenstva, mojo nekdanjo študentko, ko sem še poučeval na Lakelandu. Torej, Suzanne je tretja generacija slovenskih Američanov. Njeni predniki so z Belk pri Ljubljani, njeno delo se ukvarja z ljubeznijo, različnimi kulturami, zgodovino, rasizmom, telesno podobo, afriško modo in žensko seksualnostjo. Napisala je več knjig, za katere je požela kar nekaj nagrad. Njeni nadaljni poti lahko sledite na njenem YouTube kanalu Suzanne Andrews in na njeni spletni strani suzanneandrews.com. Prebrala bo izsek iz nagrajene knjige Semena strasti, pesmi DP Poroka, Slovenski ponos, Neizgovorjen dialog, Padec, ki se ni zgodil, mi je rešil življenje in Nosim te v krvi.
We have a lovely evening in store for you, but first let's go through the program with you and introduce some of our guests. Please welcome Dr. Suzanne Andrews, a great friend among Slovenians. She's a former student of Dr. Zibelnik's, whom he taught at Lakeland Community College. She's a third-generation Slovenian American with roots in Belka near Ljubljana. Her works deal with love, different cultures, history, racism, body image, African fashions, and women's sexuality. She has written many books and received several awards, and you can follow her journeys on her YouTube channel, Suzanne Andrews, and on her website, suzanneandrews.com. She'll read an excerpt from her award-winning books, Passion Seeds, DP Marriage, Slovenian Pride, Unsaid Dialogue, The Falling Suspended Saved My Life, and In My Blood, I Carry You. Suzanne Andrews.
Yeah, so we are not interrupting anybody, bomo kar prebrali vse. Ob naslednji gosti bi v Sloveniji padli dol. Na oder bomo namreč povabili legendarno TV voditeljico in novinarko Mojco Mavec. Na RTV Slovenija je z nasmehom vodila vrsto popotniških oddaj Čez planke, pa potem Dobro jutro in vsako večerno oddajo Poletna scena. Bila je tudi voditeljica slovenskih predizborov Evrovizije, prepoznamo pa jo tudi kot glas in obraz mnogih reklam največjih podjetij. Skratka, na odru Slovenskega narodnega doma bomo imeli pravo slovensko televizijsko zvezdo, ki nam bo prebrala nekaj odlomkov slovenskih pesnikov. Če ne znate slovensko, lahko samo prisluhnete, kako lepo zveni slovenski jezik, ko ga bere profesionalka. Zdaj pa na tretjega gosta. Tisti, ki ste že večkrat prisostvovali kulturnim dnem v Clevelandu, zadnjega gosta ni potrebno posebej predstavljati, saj vedno znova navduši svoje poslušalstvo. To je seveda Ray McNiece, avtor 12 knjig, ravno zdaj je rekel, da je 12 napisal, poezij in monologov, ki je tudi poet laureat mesta Cleveland Heights. Svoje umetnine je predstavljal v večjih državah, tudi v Sloveniji, poučuje pa na John Carroll University. Predstavil bo svoje pesmi Dedkov dih, Babičine roke ali Juha smoki in Maščevanje Clevelanda. O pesmi Dedkov dih ga bo spremljal Leo Koč na klavirju.
We have a Slovenian cultural triple threat for you this evening, so we're going to get all the introductions right away. After Suzanne Andrews has her presentation, you'll want to impress your cousins in Slovenia when you tell them that you've met our following guest, Mojca Mavec. She's a legendary TV host and journalist. The United States has Rick Steves, Slovenia has Mojca Mavec. She's a familiar figure on TV Slovenia with her travel shows and nightly program Summer Scene. She also hosts the preliminaries of the Slovenian selections for the Eurovision music competition. She's known for her countless appearances in TV ads and promotions. In short, we'll welcome to the stage of our Slovenian national home a true star of Slovenian television. She'll read a few excerpts from poems by Slovenian writers. Even if you aren't fluent in Slovenian, you can appreciate the lovely nuances of the Slovenian language when spoken by a professional like Mojca Mavec. Following Mojca, if you've been to previous Slovenian Culture Days in Cleveland, you'll know our next guest for his captivating presentations. He always enthralls us. My good friend Ray McNiece is the author of 12 collections of poetry. He has a new one out right now, and many monologues. He's a past National Slam Poetry Champion and Poet Laureate of Cleveland Heights. I was proud to MC the Haiku Smackdown when Ray won the grand prize. He has performed in many countries, including Slovenia, and teaches at John Carroll University. Ray will present his poems, Grandfather's Breath, Grandmother's Arms, Dumpling Soup, and The Revenge of Cleveland. For Grandfather's Breath, Ray will be accompanied by Leo Coach.
And now, please, applause for Susanna Andres, please.
Thank you very much. Dobre večer. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I wanted to say, too, that I have copies of my books here, so if you're interested, you can see me afterwards. The first poem I'm going to read to you points to some dark history post-World War II in Slovenia. This poem is inspired by my former neighbor, Valentin Merschel, who told me stories about living as a child in a refugee camp post-World War II in Austria. In this poem, I contemplate love in the refugee camp among poverty. It's titled DP Marriage, and DP stands for Displaced Person. DP Marriage. I met my husband in the camp where he was teaching math on a small handheld board wrapped in rags. Oh, how his nails were black, from scratching soil to plant seeds. Without tact, I told him, scrub those hands, or indeed I won't be back. He put bread, potatoes, and roasted turnips in a sack, snuck to me while others napped. Even miniature daisies, no courtesy lacked. I thought, one with sacrifice, I'll never go hungry, never lack. And now in 80, I'm full and fat. The next poem, Slovenian Pride, was inspired by studying Slovenian with Luca at Lakeland Community College when I was teaching there. One day, Luca told us how geographically Africa was impacting Slovenia, specifically Slovenian's pride, the mountain, Mount Triglav. Also, another tidbit is that another African Slovenian fact that inspired me was that Peter Bosman, a Black African from Ghana, was the mayor of the Slovenian town Prešeren from 2010 to 2018. So as we speak of diversity, this is a tribute. Slovenian pride rises higher due to an African tectonic plate. So Africa pushes Slovenian higher and higher after year, measurably higher. And Slovenes are so proud of Triglav. Everyone must climb it. But how many know what is underneath? And so today, a couple of these poems talk about what is underneath as we look at the history. This next poem takes us back to the horrors of World War II, and it's also inspired and in homage to my deceased Slovenian mechanic of Chesterland, maybe some of you knew him, Leon Radej, who had the most beautiful eyes. At age 80, he was still working repairing cars. And I imagine what could have been behind those eyes as he too came over as a refugee. First-hand massacre narratives from the book Slovenia 1945, Memories of Death and Survival After World War II also inspired this poem. So mass graves from the slayings of that time are still being found to this day throughout Slovenia. Unsaid dialogue. We don't go there anymore. We've risen up from the dead, so there is no need to talk about it. We fold our lips and just sit when they ask. It's the best thing to do. The bodies want to rest, to lie still. The slick skin, the decomposing flesh, the rising, damp heat. No one should know how we sat on top of the dead for hours waiting, hoping on bodies, praying for one step, then another. We don't go there anymore. We can't go back there. It does not exist. The fields are stretched taut over bones, and yes, I've heard they've now seen these masses of white rise up from the earth, but it does not exist. I sit tight when they speak. I don't tell them I still cannot sleep. I climbed and climbed with the breath of those from the pit. That was my strength. I don't tell them. I still ask why. Why do I walk while they below rot? I just go. I go on and on, car after car, hour by hour, working through them as the bodies go one after one behind my eyes. Okay, this is the last of our dark poems, and it continues on the prior poem, inspired from the same book, and the mass graves. And this is based on a narrative from that book of someone that got out, exactly as the poem describes it. The falling, suspended, saved my life. I looked up from the mass bodies to the beech tree bent over us, arching forward in a silent cry for the bodies piled below. I saw the roots gnarled around a rock, threw my fist out and pulled myself forward over the dead, the heat from the bodies rising as a mist under the moonlight. My heaving breath pushing me forward, the moans below beseeching me to carry the story out of the grave. Next is a lighthearted poem that is from Passion Seeds here, a tribute to how Slovenian is in my blood. For any friends here who are not Slovenian, I will tell you some of the Slovenian words. Potica, which is a nut roll, and krofe, a donut, flanceta, a type of fried dough or elephant ear or angel wing. This poem is inspired by listening to polka on the radio here in Cleveland. In my blood, I carry you. The accordion strikes chords of my ancestry. I normally do not listen to it, but tonight, polka is on the local radio, on the Slovenian Hour, and I've nothing better to do than cook and listen. The accordion sound urges my feet to hop, though I stand still, stirring cookie dough. Polka is an idea pulsating in my veins, lighter than the Slovenian sausage, potica, krofe, and flanceta circulating in my blood, ladening it with dangerous fat. The accordion invokes Lake Bled's white church on a small isle, the note of pilgrimage, pristine pilgrimage from Cleveland to Slovenia, from the sixth most polluted town in America to a country capped by the Alps. Snow-rimmed, even in summer, vibrates silently in my bones. I want to see this country that still grows vertically, reaching new heights year by year, thanks to the African tectonic plate pushing it up so Mount Triglav raises herself higher, slowly but surely, like how cookie dough, eaten raw, spikes my blood sugar and raises my lips to smile at the Slovenian polka sound on a lone Saturday night. Thank you.
Dobro večer, and good evening, everybody. Thank you, Luca, for the announcement. So my name is Mojca Mavec, and I'm obviously here to impress your cousins in Slovenia. But I have to say, I'm equally impressed by your beautiful city, being for the very first time in Cleveland. And thank you, Joe, for taking me around today, following the footsteps of the Slovenian community over here. And, you know, being a journalist and mostly being a traveler all my life, it's still a beautiful feeling that you can travel for thousands of miles and still share your culture and your language, even on the other side of the ocean. And it's sensational. So really thank you for, you know, preserving whatever it is, being Slovenian. Sometimes it's enough sharing just a piece of potica and knowing the names of your ancestors, your grandfathers and great-grandfathers. Or sometimes it's speaking the Slovenian language, which is a beautiful old language. And I'm always very proud because in the Slovenian language we have preserved a very old form of grammar that has died out in many other languages. And this is the dual, the dvojina. You know, in the Slovenian language we have a form of the verb with, in which I can explain or I can express an action shared only by two people. You know, wherever I go, I always listen to people explaining that the French or Italian language is very romantic. But actually, for me, the Slovenian language is the true language of love, because I can express something just for two people. Only a Slovene can say, midva se imava rada, midva se ljubiva. So you and me, we love each other. And it's different in Slovenian than in Italian or English language. It's very exclusive. So for me, the Slovenian language really is the language of love. And thank you, Alenka, for inviting me over, being able to read a bit of Slovenian poetry for you. And I've chosen 3 love poems written by 3 amazing ladies, just to show you that poetry isn't just a man's world, even though we are celebrating even Menati and Prešeren, who has obviously just left us for a few moments. But poetry is as well a domain of ladies. And I would like to begin with Lili Novi. She lived in the at the end of the 20th century, and she has something that we maybe have in common, very different backgrounds. So her father was German, her mother was Slovenian. She started writing poetry at a very early age, but she was recognized much, much later, being a woman in the 20th century in Slovenia. And the first poem is about that sensational feeling of love, when you fall in love, so something strikes you, that fire. And it's a poem called Fire, Organ. And it goes like that. Takrat ob tisti uri bilo je vse svetlo. Na vrt odprte duri, ožarjeno nebo. In ogenj med drevesi, in ogenj sred srca, strasti plamteči plesi, plamteči spev duha. Takrat sem začutila, da vse živi, živi. Goreča, slastna sila mi je planila v kri. Vse je postalo plamen, zelen, modrikast, zlat. Še hladni sivi kamen je zažarel škrlat. In od tedaj za mene nikjer temote ni. Za večno osvetljene so radostne stvari. In vrata so odprta v večer na žarni vrt. In rožna sredi vrta se mi smehlja še smrt. The second poem is one of my favorite Slovenian writers. She was an actress, actually. Her name is Mila Kačič. She's mostly known for her roles in comedy, but she expressed the most intimate feelings always in poetry. And the second poem is about, well, it's about love, but lacking, like missing somebody. And she was writing about this feeling when waking up and you think you hear your lover's voice, but it was just, maybe it was the wind or something. And it goes like that. So the title is Vasovalec. Danes zjutraj prav narahlo so šipe v oknih zazvenele in kakor včasih najino so sladko znamenje zapele. Saj vedela sem, da te ni, pa sem vseeno se zbudila. Kako prišel bi v uri tej, pa sem vseeno prisluhnila. To je bila le tvoja misel, ki je priromala do mene in tiho me odpoljubila, vse moje solze zadušene. And the last one, it's from another lady. She lives in Sweden. She's an architect, but writing poetry for many years. Her name is Lucia Stupica. And it's a poem about, well, the last stage of love, when everything is missing and people are somehow living apart. And a woman and a man sharing a table, which is getting longer and longer with time. They are more and more distant. But she uses the dual, the dvojina, very well in this poem, and you might understand a bit of it. Pesem o mizi. Sedela sta za isto mizo, izbirala vedno podobne jedi, si naročala isto vino, prepoznavala nasmehe v besedah in obratno, besede v nasmehih. Dnevi so tekli skozi, kasneje so tekla leta in miza je postajala vse daljša, jedi vedno bolj različne. Besede sta si podajala skozi natakarjeva usta. Na njenem krožniku je na koncu, ko se nista več slišala in skoraj ne videla, zrasla rukola. Ta okus sem plevel v neizprosni enakomernosti časa. Hvala lepa. Thank you.
That's all I know of Slovenia. My grandparents only spoke Slovenian when they didn't want us to know what they were saying. I did go to Slovenia, and I had a waiter in Zagreb of Slovenian descent that wrote a letter of introduction to Srednja Vas, the village where my grandfather was from. And I went to the village. I presented it to apparently the village idiot, and he took it to a building in which he led me to a large house, and the entire town was inside. The mayor was a barber, and she was cutting everyone's hair, and everyone was sitting there, and they read the letter. Everyone scattered, brought back food, and after about an hour, nobody spoke English, so I said, well, can we find somebody? And they said, well, we'll go to the next village, Črmršnica, and we'll find someone who speaks English. So we're all waiting at the edge of Srednja Vas for this fellow to come back. He comes back and he says, hello, how are you? The weather is nice. So we didn't get very far there. So they assured me that if I went to Črmršnica, I'd find some English speakers. I walked into this Quonset hut where there was a youth camp. And I walked in and I said, hello, does anyone speak English here? And the guy at the counter turned to me and he said, I hate Americans. And the other guy started laughing, and he said, it's all right, he hates everybody. So I ended up working at youth camp for about 2 weeks, and I worked on reconstructing waterworks that were used by the partisans during the war. And at the end of it, they took us up, and I got to write the inscription on the site, which was great. And they took us at the end of 2 weeks up to Beza 40 in the mountains where the partisans would hang out, and allegedly fed us donkey goulash. I don't know if that was true or not, but so I did climb Mount Triglav. I did do that while I was there. So I accomplished my goal as a son of Slovenia to climb Mount Triglav. I'm very proud of being Slovenian. My grandfather, as I said, came over after the First World War. And, talking about Franz Prešeren and how he was kind of shunned and scorned in his lifetime, much like most poets in their lifetime are shunned and scorned. My grandmother literally wouldn't talk to me for 10 years because I was the first male to graduate college on either side of my family, and I was they said, you're going to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, doctor, lawyer, engineer. And I thought, okay, doctor works with bodies, lawyer talks a lot, train conductor, that's one I can get behind. But she said, no, I switched my major from pre-med to English. And Grandma didn't talk to me for 10 years. Now, she would talk to me through my mother. I'd be taking her in the Buick that we got at Sims Buick and to Fanny's in the old neighborhood and to get some dinner. And she would pull herself up by her arthritic hand. She worked in a machine shop her whole life. And she'd say, and this was her name for me, the bum. She'd say, tell the bum he's never going to get a girl until he gets a real job. So my grandfather, as an immigrant, this was the one expression that he reiterated to me constantly. You work. You work, buddy. You work. Word of immigrant, get ahead grind. I hear huffing through me. My grandfather's breath when he'd come in from Saturday, keep busy chores, bending up a calloused hand to stop me from helping him, doubled over under 35 years, a machine repairman, working in the same shop, making ball bearings making everything run smoother, especially torpedoes. He busted butt for the war effort, for overtime pay on a little box of his own. Himself a refugee of the European economy, washed ashore after the war to end all wars. Cheap labor for the winners. I hear his youth plodding through the fields above Srednovas, the train that lurched and stuttered that took him to the boat where he heave-hoed consumptive sister 1, 2, overboard, to the factory smoke-choked streets of Cleveland, where he coughed out chunks of broken English, scuffling along, just to make it to Saturday afternoon, Balinsa. This is how the world turns, buddy. Work hard. Practice. And his claim was we climbed higher in the cheap seats at Municipal Stadium, slapping the flat of his palm on a girder. I built this, buddy. I built this. But mostly, I hear how he would catch what was left of his breath when he'd come in from those Saturday keep-busy chores, pouring out the one long, tall, cold beer that Grandma allowed him before taking up his last task of his day off, cleaning the cage, letting Snowball, canary like the ones once used to test coal mines for poison air, flap clumsily free around the living room, crapping on the plastic-covered Davenport and easy chair that they only uncovered and sat in twice a year. And I hear you, grandfather. I hear you. When you took me down the cool basement steps to find out what was wrong. Snowball splayed out there on the same linoleum where they found you, next to your iron lung. Well, Grandma mopped for weeks afterwards, pointing with arthritic fingers. See there? That's where he fell and bumped his head. See the specks of blood? She can't wash out. Ooh, one fine morning, when my work is done, I'm gonna fly. Gonna fly away home. Come on, Snowball. Fly. Fly. Thanks to Leo, Coach. Joe Valencia commissioned us to do that about 25 years ago. That poem from my grandfather, this working guy from Cleveland, Ohio, came over from Slovenia after the First World War. That poem has been translated into Slovenian, Russian, Italian, and Chinese. So let's hear it for Gramps. So the other thing is, the great thing about growing up Slovenian is the food, right? And so I was in a restaurant in Harvard. I was over in Boston for about 10 years doing social work. And this is back in the day when nouvelle cuisine was all the rage. If you know any French, you know that nouvelle cuisine means very expensive. So I sat down in this trendy restaurant, and they brought out the food, and there was hardly anything on the plate, and it made me long for the Slovenian food that I grew up with. So I wrote this poem, which actually won the best poem for the Cleveland Bicentennial. It's called The Revenge of Cleveland, a menu against nouvelle cuisine. At a restaurant a la Arboretum in a trendy alley back of Harvard Square, I sit down to a platter of minimalist philosophy and wait for more. When none comes, I realize this is the entree. This will cost me 3 slivers of salmon, looking for the life of them like cutouts of Play-Doh, a spot of goose liver pate nudged under a scrap of spinach grown probably in a petri dish, a dash of tortellinis, that disgrace to pasta, an upscale garnish of designer legumes, and, existentially enough, a single olive, sans pimento. The whole platter could be a display of new wave jewelry. Enough of this less is more. More is more, and I want some. Let's start with dumpling soup, the aroma buoyed by globules of chicken fat, like the 100 suns that never shine on gray Cleveland. Bring on the pierogies and put a tub of Cheese Whiz made from artificial imitation processed cheese food at one elbow, and on the other, a mound of sauerkraut steaming like the Cuyahoga stirred by a scow on a spring morning. Egg noodles, too, rolled and cut and ladled by my heavy, dumpy Slovenian great ants, pumpernickel smeared with lard. Give me a belly full of kielbasa-inspired indigestion any day, a pile that makes you spout, Leon Macduffsky, and let no mouth cry hold, enough. To top it off, a roll of pizza, a quivering dollop of pink Jell-O salad, straight from the Stuckies off the Western Pike, all frothed with non-dairy whip. Enough of this lightweight stuff that lets you off to play squash or the stocks. I want a heap of carbohydrates you can't move the rest of the afternoon. Chowed down in a bar with the Browns game blaring. A meal as profound and murky as an immigrant cathedral, as bland and fulfilling as a busload of Slovenians coming home from polka varieties, dreaming of Sunday dinner. So, again, you know, I want to thank my grandparents, even though I didn't become a doctor. I have had a lot of success, and particularly in these latter days. I was awarded a huge, enormous grant from the American Academy of Poetry to create this poem for Cleveland. It's the story of Cleveland through poetry. And there are many, Susanna's in it, Miles, who is going to be reading, my Serbian cousin, he's also in it. I run a series at the Millard Fillmore on Waterloo, the old neighborhood over there, and we do it every third Sunday. It's a great program of much like this with music and poetry. I want to read just one last poem for you. It's in this book, and I am giving this book to Franz Prešeren right now. My fellow shunned and scorned poet, long-haired poet, his grandparents probably didn't like his occupation either. So this is called A City to Cover with Lines, and it's the title poem of that love song for Cleveland. That's another book of mine, of this book, Poem for Cleveland. D.A. Levy was one of our poets back in the day in the beatnik era here in Cleveland, and he said, I have a city to cover with lines. So one of the prompts I used when I was doing this documentary poetry catalog of all of Cleveland poems and poets, I thought, let's think about the idea of what a line is, a line of poetry, et cetera, et cetera. We have gathered here tonight, this chorus of Clevelanders, ghosts of ancient tongues, still haunting our verses. As all our storylines entwine, we have a city to cover with lines. Beginning with song lines of Erie people, long-tailed cat nation, following game trails that became Lakeshore Boulevard, southwards down the Crooked River towards Chillicothe. Lines of current carving layers of cliff shale sediment, ancient sea that once covered the whole Midwest, long straight line of prehistoric beach, now Euclid Avenue, later known as Millionaire Row. Contour lines of burial mound plowed through to make East 9th Street, zigzag lines on poetry shards found there, surveyor lines, Moses Cleveland's party parceling the city. Lines of lake effect clouds sliding over, pulling gray sheets over an already gray skyline. Crests of white-capped waves crashing the shore, lines of delicate filament snagging on rebar reef of municipal stadium rubble, fish fries on Friday, perch. Lines of tail lights for miles, traffic jammed at rush hour. Dried salt slush lines edging the bottom of beaters. Lines of sirens careening around Dead Man's Curve, while coupling couplets clang boxcars, echoing Collinwood train yards, trundling east and westwards from the best location in the nation. As the civic tagline told in bold, lines of I-94 lanes that cut neighborhoods in half, including Collinwood. From East Cleveland to West Park, lines of orange barrels that bloom every spring when roadwork season begins. Rounds of bent rim tires ringing potholes on Fulton from Ohio City to Old Brooklyn. Lines of marathon runners over the Detroit Superior Bridge. Tug lines, rippling tug lines on the Cuyahoga. The river demarcating the Greenville Treaty, 1795, once the western border of these United States. arcing tail of rail spark that ignited the wavering oil slick in '69, once burning river at Collision Bend. Fugue of freighter horns bellowing call and response from bridge to bridge as long lines of scullers slide by. Rusty lines configuring sides of abandoned factories, one long sunset horizon line over the cobalt cold blue Lake Erie smoldering like the orange glow along the smelter's berm, the last steel mill still burning in the flats. Lines of colorful lights, stanza by stanza, ascending the terminal tower spire. Lines of coyotes these days in the valley, howling at the sight of the full moon as round as a foul ball pop-up at the Jake. Wheeling flight lines of migrating birds all the way from South America over Cuyahoga's alluvial basin, lines of daffodils bedazzling Lakeview Cemetery hillside in spring, lines of sycamores fluttering full summer shade along Edgewater Beach, jagged lines of ice-jammed teeth at Euclid Creek's mouth. Skyline of three high rises, shining, rising, we gaze through high summer haze, through blue October sky, the sun big and orange as a Brown's helmet, to cold gray March skies that won't give up the ghost of winter. Lines of beer pissed into the snow pile behind the bar that doesn't melt until May. Lines of everybody's green and Irish along St. Patrick's Day parade, squealing lines of bagpipers. Spines of poetry books on shelves at Mac's backs, lines of musical scores conducted at Severance Hall, lines of Egyptian hieroglyphs and abstract expression hanging in the walls of the Cleveland Museum of Art, lines of polka dancers hopping to accordions, lines of dancers at weddings doing the electric slide, reels from the old sod echoing the angle, banshees of Irish Bend, blues lines riffs from down home Red Clay, Alabama, strummed in juke joints on East 105th, all meeting here, the home of rock and roll, the Moondog Coronation Ball, where lines of whites-only ropes came down and kids all danced in one colorful swirl. All those storylines intersecting here, merging into this multicolored scripture, weaving together this poem we call home, Cleveland. I also have some of those anthologies for sale.
Tako, z nekim uradnim delom tega dogodka smo prišli do konca, ampak ni pa še vse končano. Na nekaj slovenskih dogodkih ste že lahko prisluhnili jazz triu Leja Coacha, tudi danes smo že malo slišali. V bendu so Rick Kodermac, tudi Slovenec, na basu in Alan Nemeth na bobnih, tudi Slovenec, in Leo Coach na klavirju. Leo Coach je poleg Amerike kar znan tudi v Sloveniji, se je igral na večjih festivalih Lent v Mariboru, delal kompozicije za RTV Slovenija in igral na Ljubljanskem jazz festivalu ter priredil mnoge druge koncerte po raznoraznih klubih po Sloveniji. Z njimi bo zapela Nancy Reid, ki poje od svojega 4., flavto igra pa od svojega 9. leta dalje. Glasbo je študirala tudi na Clevelandskem glasbenem inštitutu in Collegeu Baldwin Wallace. Svojim očetom, ki jo je navdušil nad jazzom in tudi drugimi skupinami, je nastopala po vseh lokalnih glasbenih institucijah tu naokoli, kot so Wade Oval, Clevelandski umetnostni muzej in Clevelandska javna knjižnica. Ob svojem petju piše tudi pesmi in nastopa v reklamah. Torej, to boste lahko poslušali tudi med tem, ko boste nazdravili s kakšnim kozarčkom in pojedli kaj dobrega. Moram pa povedati, da na koncu bo pa še tisti Perušek prišel, ne? In v manjših skupinah se boste lahko odpravili na ogled med tem vsem razstave privatne kolekcije slik Gregorja Peruška v dvorcu Dimer, ki je ravno tukaj. Zbirali se boste pri tistih vratih, tamle, in vodila vas bosta arhitekt Toni Hiti in kustos in predsednik Slovenskega muzeja in arhiva dr. Greg Nosen. Perušek, tega, ki si ga boste ogledali ali pa ste ga že morda videli, je pri 14 emigriral v Cleveland in ustanovil Jugoslovansko šolo moderne umetnosti. Bil je samouk, a je vseeno spremljal moderne tokove slikarstva, ustvarjal pa je predvsem industrijske in fantazijske pokrajine, fantastične slike. Peruškova zbirka v Clevelandskem narodnem domu je največja na svetu, v Sloveniji imamo nekaj je v zasebnih rokah. Več o njem boste pa slišali v dvorcu Dimer. Jutri pa, kot je bilo že rečeno, vsi vabljeni v Slovenski muzej in arhiv na odprtje razstave Zgodovina slovenskega športa. To je od naju vse.
Nažalost, končujemo, ampak ne glih, bomo še imeli glasbo z trio Leo Koču. We're drawing to a close, but not so fast. We still have the music of the jazz stylings of the all-Slovenian Leo Koč trio. You've heard the trio perform at previous Slovenian events. We have Rick Kodramash on bass, Alan Nemeth on the drums, and Leo Koč on the keyboard, plus a special guest, Nancy Red, for vocals and flute. Alan Nemeth is a multi-instrumentalist and composer who has worked with and studied from many notable artists in jazz and classical music, and in his association with the Contemporary Music School, he's worked with Carl Berger, Oliver Lake, and others. Rick Kodramash has been performing as a musician in the Cleveland area for 50 years. He's a founding member of the Contemporary Music Coalition, the Moko Bovo Band, and the Out Lab for Experimental Music. Of course, Leo Koč teaches at Cleveland State University and chairs the music department at Ursuline College. He has performed in Slovenia, most notably at Maribor's Lent Festival and the Ljubljana Jazz Festival, in addition to arrangements for TV Slovenia and appearances at music clubs in Slovenia. We also welcome vocalist and flute artist Nancy Red. Nancy's been performing since childhood and studied at the Cleveland Institute of Music and Baldwin Wallace University. Her father, Cleveland saxophonist Reggie Red, inspires her craft. She has performed with her dad and with other groups at events and venues such as Wade Oval Wednesdays, the Art Museum, the Cleveland Public Library. Nancy also writes poetry and appears in ads and promotions. And last year, the first event in the refurbished Slovenian Workmen's Home on Waterloo Road was the wedding of Nancy and Ray. After this evening, you can enjoy the music and the reception, but we urge you to check out the exhibition in the Deemer House. This evening, you can break out into smaller groups and see this private collection of works by Slovenian Cleveland painter Harvey Prešeren in the Deemer House with guided tours by representatives of the Slovenian Home Museum. He was born Gregor Perušek and came to Cleveland at age 14 and lived around the country while expressing himself as an artist. Although self-taught, Harvey Prešeren followed trends in modern painting and created industrial scenes, landscapes, and fantastical arrangements. He also established the Yugoslav School of Modern Art here in the Slovenian National Home and taught many students from the neighborhood in his studio. He also developed art projects for the WPA. The collection here at the Slovenian National Home is the largest of its kind in the country.
Hvala lepa.
Hvala lepa.
Prosim.
Leo Koč.